Okay everyone, so welcome to another video about object-oriented programming. As I said, I'm going to make this one mostly about what is the difference between static and non-static classes. I'm very quickly going to create a class that we can work with to do this as a little bit of a refresher. So I'm going to make a class about books. So assume you're a librarian and you have a whole library system and you're trying to keep track of books. You might want to have a book object. So in our book object, we're going to have a couple things that define the book. So we might have a private string title. We might have a private string author. I feel like I'm spelling author wrong. And we're going to have the library's tracking ID. Okay, so private int library ID. So whatever ID the library assigns to the book. So we're actually going to start off with that library ID being, let's say 1. So the first library ID is 1. We're going to need to create a constructor for our book. So same way that we did before, the constructor is always public. It does not have a return type, and it shares the name with the class. In this case, our book is going to take in the author and the title. So we can write this in the format of giving it the parameters a different name than the main name. And we're just going to initialize those global class variables. So we're going to get the class title and set it equal to book title. We're going to get the class author. Remember, you can use, to ensure you're getting the class author, you can use this dot. Book author. Okay, and we don't need to initialize library ID because it's already set to 1 by default. What we are going to do is we don't want every single book to share the same library ID, but we do want to automatically set, actually let's get rid of the equals 1. Let's write a function for this. What we do want to do is make the library ID shared amongst all the books, so that each book has its own library ID. But every time we add a book, we can add to the library ID. So for example, so we're going to do private static meaning belonging to the class. So private static int current available ID. So the current available ID is going to be 1. This particular book does not yet have an ID. We will set library ID equal to current available ID. So the way this works is that each time a book is declared, the book title is stored in title, book author is stored in author, and then the library ID for that book, so maybe instead of library, let's use book so that we're not confusing it with the current available. Okay, so the book ID is set equal to whatever the currently available ID is. Then we need to make sure that we change the currently available ID so when the next book is created, we can increment that. So we can actually here just say current available ID plus plus, so that increments it by 1. So because this is static, and this is the key here, because current available ID is a static variable, it is shared amongst all of the books. So we said yesterday that when you create an instance of the book class or create an instance of a class, you get a separate copy of each piece of data. You get a separate title variable. You get a separate author variable. You get a separate book ID variable. In this case, because of the static, you do not get a separate current available ID variable. That is shared amongst all the objects. So if we write a book tester class, in our book tester class, we're going to have a public static void main. Standard public main class. In our public main class, I'm going to create a couple book objects. So book B1 is equal to new book, which forces the constructor. We need to pass it a title. Looking for books at my house. We need to pass it a book title. So 20,000 Leagues. I feel like I should know who authored 20,000 Leagues, but I don't. Jules Verne. Okay, that was really obvious. Jules Verne authored that. Probably give him a capital on his first name. Book B2, a new book. Should have thought of some book titles before I did this example. The aliens are coming. Author Ben Miller. This is actually an excellent book about space science. Okay, so we have 2 books now. The only ID we ever set was 1. But now we can see these 2 books. If we print them, we haven't set up a toString method yet, so they're just going to print as the crazy the array pointers. Okay, so if I run it right now, it's going to print the array pointers. So I'm going to go back to my book class. Oh, sorry, I ran the one from a different class. Too many classes in this project. It's just printing the array pointers. I'm going to go ahead to my book class and write a toString method. Note for you guys, toString methods always have to be public. Okay, so in my toString method, I am going to go ahead and return a string that I would want to print out when I think print a book. So it's going to be title plus title. Comma space, what else we have? Author plus author, comma space, ID, number, I'll just do ID. Book ID. Okay, that should work fine. Go back to book tester, run our main method, and now we're expecting it to print out a string for each. So, for the first one, we get title, 20,000 Leagues, author, Jules Verne, ID 1. For the second book, we get title, The Aliens Are Coming, author, Ben Miller, ID number 2. So notice that because this currently available ID number is shared amongst all the books, when we created the first book object, it stored 20,000 Leagues, it stored Jules Verne, it set that book's ID to 1, the currently available, and then it incremented that currently available to 2. When we created the second book, it stored The Aliens Are Coming, it stored Ben Miller, and then it set book ID to that shared currently available ID of 2, because that's what had been updated in the previous call. So when the previous book was created. So this static basically means belonging to the class and shared amongst all parts of the class. You can also have static functions Sometimes you cannot mix and match them. If you build a static function, actually, let's just do that. Public static sample function. So if we have a static function, and in our static function, public static has to have a return type, void sample function. If we try to alter the non-static parts, so let's say we say title equals, this is a new title, it won't work. And the reason we're getting an error on title here is because it's a non-static field. Title cannot be referenced from a static context. Because this is a static method, it would be shared amongst every single instance of this object. So every single book would share it. So both B1 and B2 would share this function, but B1 and B2 have different copies of title, so this call doesn't really make sense in that context. So if you're ever running into that non-static issue, it's because of something like this, where you have a non-static variable declared inside a static class. You can go the other way, as we did in book. Book is a non-static function, but it accesses the static variable, and that's fine because book has book has access to that static variable. Here, because the function is shared amongst all the classes and each one has a different title, it has no idea what to do. So this function is not possible. You can write static functions. Actually, I'll just show you that. Let's say increase, or let's do set available ID. And set available ID is going to take in a int ID. And all this is going to do is update current available ID to ID. This is fine because both the function is static, but also this variable is static. So because every single class shares this variable, there's no confusion about which one you're updating. So you can have a static function even though the class is not static, as long as you're only accessing static variables in it. I know that's a little bit confusing, but hopefully this idea that static means belonging to the class and it's shared amongst all the instances clarifies that information for you.